Ymedia Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
Hello, welcome to Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh, and the latest updates on the U.S., Israel, and Iran war. Lebanon's Prime Minister Salem says that the ceasefire agreement has not been fully implemented as fighting between Hezbollah and Israel continue in the south of the country. Essentially, we have the Israeli side saying that they plan on doing an occupation of South Lebanon to the Litani River. That's about 10% of Lebanon's land. And we know that the both sides, such as Israel and Lebanon, after 37 years, were to meet in Washington, D.C. for the second round and third round of talks. But essentially, right now, the Prime Minister of Lebanon saying that the decision to restrict weapons in Beirut is irreversible, and essentially saying the negotiations have not begun yet. And the Washington meetings are preliminary in preparation for them. So we know the ambassadors from both sides have been meeting twice. And so now we have the Prime Minister saying that they were preliminary and they're preparing for the real negotiations. Essentially, the Prime Minister said that this conflict is continuing so far. Even though there was a ceasefire announced by Washington, it hasn't been followed. Lebanon's wartime death toll since this war started for them in early March, I believe it was March 3rd, is now 2,696. Lebanon's health minister says that a total of 2,696 people have been killed, and about 8,264 people have been wounded in the country since Israel intensified its attack in southern Lebanon. And the exact date was March 2nd, so it was a few days after the war started on February 28th between Israel, United States, and Iran. And when it comes to the Israeli side, Israel says that 17 of its soldiers have been killed in southern Lebanon, with 2 civilians killed by Hezbollah attacks. So this is an ongoing conflict, which will be part of what Iran says is their proposal to President Trump to see if he will accept it to end wars on all measures. Now, we know this year is the U.S. midterms election, and here's the latest update. Essentially, we know that this war has significantly impacted President Trump's numbers. And to that, the Democrats have been very optimistic because President Trump's polling numbers is at an all-time disapproval rate at 62%. This is as per the WAPO ABC News Ipsos poll, essentially published it over the weekend, saying that his all-time disapproval rate is one of the highest it's been at 62%, and his lowest polling rating of any policy area that he's handled. And of course, there's this war which has affected the cost of gas and the cost of living for Americans. And so there are multiple surveys that show Americans care about the cost of living the most. This is something that this president had campaigned on in 2024 and won on being able to make, cost of living more affordable. But things have shifted, of course, since this war has started. And obviously the biggest thing is gas prices. It's hit an average of $4.45 a gallon over the weekend. And this is according to AAA. Essentially, that's a 30-cent rise in the past week, and it's up a whopping $1.28 from this time last year. So that's very significant. And when it comes to the national price of oil, it's $4.50 a gallon, and this could hit another round of bad headlines for the president. And this is a time where voters are saying that these price hikes and increases are directly impacted because this war that's taking place that is in a stalemate in terms of coming to an end of war agreement. And cost of living, with these prices of diesel increasingly high, it's affected numerous goods. When it comes to CPI inflation running at 3.3% in the United States, that is higher than when Trump came to power. So under President Trump, inflation numbers at 3.3% does not look so good for this president when the pre-election interest rates were lower. And of course, we know that the Fed chair he's been trying to replace with Kevin Warsh, becomes now a little bit more slim. So a lot of things on the move when it comes to the situation in the United States, and specifically for President Trump. And another thing is that this president's messaging discipline is off. We know because of this war, for example, it started with, changing the regime in Iran, then it changed to removing the enriched uranium out of Iran with boots on the ground, then it changed to opening up the Strait of Hormuz, and now it's changed to, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and not coming to, some sort of an agreement. So because of the fact that, the messaging from this president has been inconsistent about this war, and when it comes to affordability, it's going to impact. These are things that the Democrats are looking forward to, but then there's also history, right? There's historic facts that 18 of the 20 past midterm elections, the president's party lost seats in the House. So this could essentially happen again because it is a historic trend. Now, when it comes to Republicans, well, they are trying to be optimistic about a few things, even though we're, months ahead from the midterms. Essentially, there's been redistribution taking place, and last week's Supreme Court decision could land the Republicans an extra 4 extra seats in the House. Redistribution happens when there's a population growth, and essentially ridings need to be redistributed. And in the United States, they call them districts. Here in Canada, we call them ridings. And sometimes that works in the favor of one party over another party. Now, we know in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis' decision last week to go all in on redistricting, which will be redistribution of their districts, essentially could yield the Republicans up to 12 more seats. And that's, of course, in theory, if based on, stats and polling and previous voting records. Now, the other thing that the Republicans are hopeful about when it comes to these midterms is that, the Democrats might just be Democrats, right? When it comes to their messaging, when it comes to their poor candidate selection. I mean, if you take a look at, even, when Joe Biden stepped down, there was Kamala Harris who became the presidential candidate, and a lot of people essentially voted against Biden. There was a lot of records of Democrats saying they're gonna, hold their breath, or people who actually don't side with either parties, independents saying they're gonna go with the Republicans in the last general election because of the poor record of, candidate selection on the Democratic side. So this could be another issue of them having, mismatch in terms of messaging. And, you have Bernie Sanders with one type of messaging, you have the Democrats, with another messaging. And now we've seen Obama making the rounds in the news as well. So it's very interesting to see what this means in terms of cohesive messaging on the Democrat side and attracting candidates that are going to be, well-known and capable candidates. And to that, well, there's a lot of shifts between what could be taking place. And we've seen that President Trump, essentially, when he decides to step up and, start campaigning and being consistent, we know that he can really, with what he announces on social media about a certain candidate, can really make shifts and movements for a candidate and their chances in elections. So we are still 6 months before the midterm, so a lot can happen, obviously, and politics, a lot can change from last week. So it's still very, very early in terms of where the midterms are. And coming over here in Canada, well, Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Armenia for the European Cooperation Summit. This is the first time you've had a non-EU member attend this. It's the political community gathering, and Canada is a part of it. And Prime Minister Mark Carney has been meeting with leaders of Ukraine, Spain, Italy, and Poland, along with other European Union officials, to have this conversation. And essentially, it's coming at a time where there's uncertainty over the U.S. foreign policy under President Trump. There's the ongoing wars and conflicts, such as what's been taking place with, Russian war in Ukraine, the war with Iran, and of course, when it comes to questions about NATO unity. There you can see Prime Minister Mark Carney, Prime Minister. There you go. We can tune in if you want to play it.
This is Yeah.
As ice hockey, but it's a true passion in Spain.
Look, I'm very confident in our Canadian side. Who I had the great fortune of witnessing the first goal that Canada has scored in the World Cup. We're looking for a win, but it's good to have a backup team. So that
absolutely, and let's hope that Spain and Canada meet at the semi-final.
Semi-final will do. That would be fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good. And look, we have much to discuss. Great partnership between the two, and a great admirer of your leadership, Pedro. Okay.
Likewise. Thank you.
There you go. That was Prime Minister Mark Carney with the leader of Spain. And so just some key facts about this. This is the 8th European Political Community Summit. It's held in Armenia. Essentially, Canada is the first non-European country to be invited. Mark Carney does very well with the European allies. Top discussions, of course, NATO, Iran conflict, Ukraine, trade. When it comes to tariffs, all of that is on the table. Essentially, this tension with the United States is a massive shift in alliance, where Canada is leaning more towards its European Union partners versus the United States, and same with the European Union when it comes to Canada. Now, the summit scale, it's about 45 to 48 countries participating across Europe and their partners. And when it comes to the implications of why Canada is important there, is that Canada-EU ties, the trade is about $178.6 billion, and that is the stats from 2025, and the EU FDI in Canada is $193 billion. And now Canadian investments in the European Union is $297 billion. So this is very strategic for Canada to be able to have these partnerships beyond US reliance. Of course, it's going to be very hard to get away from the US reliance, given that Canada exports 75% of its exports to the United States. We have the CUSMA renegotiations taking place July 1st. So that's around the corner. And so to this, we know that just because of this war that's been taking place in Iran, President Trump essentially asked NATO to, join in very early on in the war to open up the Strait of Hormuz. To that, NATO said that they cannot be involved because they did not start the war. And since then, President Trump has now announced that it's going to withdraw its troops out of specific countries that was in. So about 5,000 troops from Germany, he's going to be moving them. And we know when it comes to Ukraine, President Trump hasn't been that nice to President Volodymyr Zelensky. If you recall that awkward meeting they had at the White House in the Oval Office, that was quite bad. And so we know there's been a lot of tension escalating, whereas we see Canada leaning more towards the European Union and agreement with the philosophy and ideologies, and President Trump really pulling Europe away from European Union and NATO member allies. So this is a massive shift. The focus is on defense coordination. We know President Trump's talked about Canada becoming the 51st state. We know that we know that President Trump has also been talking about Greenland as a strategic acquisition. So those are all of, defense coordination when it comes to the Arctic as top of mind, economic cooperation, as well as regional security leadership. So, Canada is becoming the bridge between what would be Europe and North America by expanding its defense, trade, and geopolitical influence. Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, has met with many leaders. If you want to take a look, we have some bites and clips of all his meetings throughout this weekend as well as today. Take a look.
Let's have a meeting. Meet Mark. Well, Donald, it's a pleasure. Thank you for hosting me, Donald. But it's great to. It is an appropriate way to begin the summit for Canada, and it's an honor for Canada to be invited to the European political area. This action, there's much to discuss and there's much to do, and I think many examples can be taken from our relationship. Relationship born of common ancestry. I know that you came to Wilno in Ontario. Yes, you are rightly a hero, but also the connections are deep with your home province. Poland, with Kashubia. But we've made a lot of progress since.
Especially like Kashubian.
Yes, the Kashubian connections.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But we last met formally.
There you go. That's Prime Minister Mark Carney. There's a few more videos where he meets with the Italian Prime Minister and Ukraine's Prime Minister, the President Volodymyr Zelensky. So we know that Canada is trying to bridge its economy when it comes to becoming an energy supplier, a financial partner, and what would be a political intermediary between North America and Europe. So this is the latest. Of course, we're going to cover with you what this means as things progress. Now, coming to the home front, well, Canada made a huge announcement today, and it launched its economic update last week. But some of the items that came out of the economic update have been when it comes to businesses. So we know that there's a lot of businesses where the owners are reaching a certain age and they may retire, and these established businesses that are in our communities, essentially, there isn't a succession plan in place. And now, so Canada is making a major tax incentive that encourages business owners to sell their companies to employees through what they call as the Employee Ownership Trust. So that stands for EOTS. This policy allows owners to avoid tax up to $10 million in capital gains, essentially when selling to an EOT, which is an Employee Ownership Trust. So we know lots of established businesses that have been around in our communities for 20, 30 years, and the owner operator is ready to retire, whether it's the dentist office or a local community store. All of those, at a time where the owner is looking, if it's not looking to pass down to its family, if the owner has kids to take over the business, and if maybe the kids are not interested, essentially is looking to be able to sell. And now this scheme will shift things around, which would be the employees essentially being able to be in a position of ownership under this, what would be the Employee Ownership Trust. So essentially, this is reshaping how businesses are sold in Canada from what would be corporate buyouts to employee ownership. So this is, and there's so many, like when it comes to the pharmacy, the local pharmacy or the local spa, these are all business owners that have been there and established businesses, right? And we know that they, small businesses are the backbone of the Canadian economy, and those businesses employ, a few employees. And so this is a shift. So now this new tax exemption is up to $10 million in capital gain tax-free. The structure is where an employee gains ownership via a trust. So essentially the management still runs the day-to-day operations, not the same as what would be a co-op, which is a less operational disruption. But now the timeline is supposed to be, where it won't be temporary. This will now be a permanent policy. So now 75% of small business owners are planning to exit in the next in the next decade, so in the next 10 years. There is an estimated of $2 trillion in business assets that are at stake if it doesn't, if there isn't a corporate buyout, if the business is not inherited through family members, then this, you have $2 trillion of business assets at stake. And 75% of small business owners, that's massive for them to make an exit and retire within the next 10 years. So now what this does is this keeps the businesses Canadian owned, because, so many businesses we've seen get acquired. There are Canadian, businesses that started in Canada and they were operating in Canada, like Tim Hortons, for example, and then it was bought by, a US corporation. And therefore, things shifted. So we've had a lot of Canadian companies actually get acquired by American companies. So this is a strategy to be able to keep Canadian businesses Canadian owned. If it allows their employees to have the ability to go into ownership, and so this will prevent foreign buyers coming in, buying in Canadian businesses, and especially also private equity roll-ups, right, that we've seen take place. So now more companies could stay locally owned. community anchored and owned by Canadians. Now, it gives the employees a real wealth upside because the employees don't just earn wages then, they also start building equity in the business. And when they start building equity in the business, they show up a little bit differently. So no longer is it just a job that they go to, to fill their weekly hours, whether it's 9 to 5 or whatever the case is. This is now a place that they put into because now they're building equity in a business that they are working in and they're operating in and of course share in long-term value in, right? So that's a massive shift, mindset shift for the employee as well. And of course, it solves the succession crisis, right? In terms of if it's not going to be inherited by a family member, what to do then, right? So the owner wants to retire. There's no clear buyers. So this essentially builds an exit strategy for the owners that are ready to retire. So, when you compare what's happening in the United States, right, there's 15 million employees in similar work models. And, and this is, to see how well it works. So in the United States, you have about the average quit rates at 1/3 of average, where the net wealth is about 92% higher than early careers, and retirement savings are 2 times higher. So this isn't just a theory of could this work? This is actually a proven scale for businesses here, Canadian businesses, and owners. Now, there are some critics that say that, it's not a perfect solution. And really, what is a perfect solution to some of these issues? But, because there might be a case where owners may accept lower sale prices because it's, being acquired by employees through an employee ownership trust versus, a foreign or, outside of the business. And it could create some, financing structures can be complex because of this, and maybe all businesses are not suitable for this model. But of course, the trade-off is that if you were to sell it to, private entity, you might get a maximum price for it, but then you lose the legacy that would be there when it comes to, employees stepping up into employee ownership. So this is a massive shift, and and of course, at a time where we're seeing wages changing, and we have the unemployability numbers going up and staying consistent within the last few months. We're now seeing that another major thing when it comes to the public sector, their union is actually in talks with the federal government, and this federal public sector union that controls about 120,000 government employees has now rejected what the government is offering, a 4-year proposal of a 3.5% wage increase. Essentially, they said they call it insulting because of the rising cost of living. So, we know that cost of living is going through the roof. So at this time, when the union is in negotiations for their federal government employee salaries with the federal government, they have rejected the offer of a 3.5% wage increase. This dispute is highlighting what is this tension between the federal government and its public servants. And this dispute is really over, the real wages versus inflation, essentially saying this 3.5% increase will be below what they're seeing in inflation. So essentially, workers say that the offer amounts to real pay cuts when adjusted to inflation. And what that does that mean is the purchase power that every dollar has. And if the inflation numbers go high, then the purchase power goes lower for every dollar, right? So essentially what is on offer right now is that it's a 3.5% total increase over 4 years. That's roughly about 1% per year, shy of 1%, obviously. And the union response to that, to the federal government, is that they're saying it's inadequate, and they're calling it disrespectful, saying that it doesn't match the inflation or cost of living. We know that this Canada's federal public service, which covers 120,000 employees across all the departments of public service of Canada. Essentially, they're saying that inflation has been roughly around 2 to 4% annually, even though it's supposed to be at 2%. We've seen the increases, and they're saying that this 1% annual raise will be a decline in real income because the federal workers will lose their purchasing powers, right? So this could mean if this labor tension increases between the federal government and the union, it may mean strikes, it may mean negotiation breakdowns, but it's still very early on. We'll see where the government is going to go. We know that the government, when it comes to higher wages, has been, that's one of the pushes from the union side. But we also know that this government is looking at letting go of certain employees, federal employees, throughout the workforce to be able to cut down the size that we saw inflate over COVID. We saw the expansion of, mass hirings, not only in the government side, but we also saw that on the tech side, mass hirings. And then in these last few years, we're seeing the massive shift take place. Now, there's a big announcement from Ottawa, essentially announcing $1 billion in relief for steel and aluminum companies where they've been affected by the tariffs by United States, by President Trump. Take a look. Today was an announcement by two ministers, Melanie Joly and Evan Solomon. Take a look at their announcement today.
Between $2 million up to $50 million. The first year will be zero interest rate, and afterwards, year second and third will be very low rates. There will be no repayment for the entire 3 years, only actually interest to be paid on these loans, and at the end of the 3 years, that's when repayment will be asked. Donc, j'ai le plaisir d'annoncer aujourd'hui $1 milliard
par l'Agence de développement régional. This brings the amount we are investing in this initiative to $1.5 billion nationally. Okay? We are here for workers. This additional funding will help SMEs like the one we're here face the tariff-related challenges, access the funding they need to make strategic pivots, improve productivity, diversify markets, and stay competitive. And this initiative is helping companies like Beaurock right here. This proud Canadian manufacturer, specializing, as you've all seen, in custom-built steel and stainless steel dump truck bodies, is a key employer in the region, almost 100 workers, and an important contributor to Canada's manufacturing supply chain. In 2023, they received an investment of over $6 million.
There you go. That was Minister Melanie Joly and Minister Evan Solomon making an announcement here in Ontario for up to $1 billion for companies in the steel and aluminum industries that have been affected by the U.S. tariffs. Essentially, what this also appears is that we know that Prime Minister Mark Carney's announcement on his YouTube channel that was, released about a couple of weeks ago was an 8-minute video which we played for you. Him saying that things don't look so well and essentially preparing Canadians for what could be not the best CUSMA negotiations that are set to take place in just about 2 months on July 1st. So this is some of the measures that seem to be put in place essentially to create a buffer for what could come for Canadian steel and aluminum if these trade talks with the United States do not go well. So this is we're seeing some of these things take place, and it's an indication to what the Prime Minister is concerned about from his announcement on his video to some of the, the spring economic updates, some of the measures in there, and now this big announcement by these two ministers when it comes to manufacturing steel and aluminum here in Canada. Of course, there's the auto industry, and we're looking to see what some of the measures are for the auto industry. That has been highly affected by Trump's tariffs. So it's a very critical time. And, with the ongoing war and the stalemate of talks with Iran and the United States, of course, that is affecting us gas prices. And to that, we know that the federal gas excise tax of 10 cents per liter and 4 cents on diesel has been removed, but we're still seeing these skyrocketed prices take place. So, of course, we're going to bring you the latest on these developing stories and what it means for Canadians here at home. I'm Ramona Singh. This is all the time we have, and this is Ymedia Newsroom. Until tomorrow, take care and be well.